Good evening and welcome to the sixth and final session of our TWU Bold LeadHERship Speaker Series. We have enjoyed a number of topics, and tonight we're here to wrap it up by giving you just a little more good information about how to advance into leadership positions in the workforce. This session is brought to you on behalf of the TWU College of Business and also the TWU Jane Nelson Institute for Women Leadership. The two institutions within TWU both have a mission of advancing women in the workforce. I am Dr. Dewana Horn, and I am Associate Dean in the College of Business. I also serve as Associate Professor of Management in the College of Business. I am located at the Houston campus. Our College of Business offers classes in Denton, Dallas, and in Houston. We have undergraduate programs in a number of business disciplines: accounting, finance, marketing, management, human resource management, healthcare administration. We also have, the College of Business also has a graduate program in healthcare administration and also an MBA and a number of emphasis with the MBA. We have areas of emphasis in accounting, marketing, management, women in leadership, sports management, human resource management, data analytics. I may be missing a few, but check out our website to see all of our offerings in the College of Business with our MBA. And another popular degree that we have is the dual degree in healthcare administration and business administration. Okay, so tonight this session is a little different from previous sessions. It's going to be more of a workshop where we are going to allow you to ask specific questions about your resume and about your virtual brand. We have two speakers for tonight. And this is going to be a very interactive session where we encourage you to participate and bring your specific questions about your resume and some of the issues and challenges that you've been having getting your resume seen and understood by the people that you want to understand it the most. Our first speaker for tonight is Ms. Catherine Wheeler. Catherine Wheeler. Here she is. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Dewana. Dr. Dewana.
Hey, just Dewana is good. Okay. Catherine is a change management expert with over a decade of research and coaching experience, and she equips leaders, organizations, and professionals to use words and stories as transformational tools. Whether in business or life, Catherine teaches and uses the power of narratives to create mission-driven impact. Through her speaking and her courses and her online store, which is theonlinecareerstore.com, Catherine equips professionals to become the CEO of their careers by discovering and packaging their professional stories to seize the career opportunities they really want. Thank you for being here, Catherine. We're so glad to have you.
I am excited to be with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Great. So before I started introducing you, I was mentioning that this session will be very interactive and that we encourage participation. We want everyone to ask their questions by typing into the chat box, and we will get to your questions as best as we can, but ask your questions throughout the session. This will be a very interactive session. So I am going to leave you with Catherine at this point. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. Welcome, everyone. This will be a good time. Let's get the chat rolling. I'm going to do a very brief introduction because Juana's already done the big piece of it. Just let me know in the chat, why did you sign up for this session? Why did you show up for this session? What is challenging for you as you think about your resume? I will tell you that I know there are some people who would rather stand in the middle of a street than have to update their resume because resumes can feel very daunting. And I think that we're all wondering, what is the place of resumes as we move into 2022. But I'm very excited to kind of dive into some of that detail with you guys today. The first thing I'll tell you as we get started is that I've been on both sides of the table. I've been on the side where I've needed to apply for roles and I've had to update my resume for opportunity. And then I've also been on the side of the table where I've had to screen resumes. I started my career as a recruiter. I was a recruiter for several years, and then I became a hiring manager, and now I manage multiple teams that do both recruitment and hiring. So this space is not new to me. Bad, good, or indifferent, I know probably way more than I want to know at times about resumes, but I'm really, really excited to share some of that information with you. As we get started, I also want to share with you that resumes are simply an account of your professional success. That's it. And sometimes I think we put a lot into thinking about what a resume is or what it's not, but it's literally the only document that you have that really captures your professional story. And so today I want to really work with you on how we weave your brand story through the resume as we're navigating different opportunities. So let me know in the comments, what is it that you're wanting to work on today? What is it that what burning questions do you have? And if you've got no questions and you got nothing specific you want to work on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, please hit me with the truck, 1 being, I'm down, let's do this. Tell me where you are when you feel, how do you feel when it's time for you to update your resume? 10 is like, I absolutely can't. I'm off the charts. I can't handle it. And 1 is like, no, I got this. I'm smooth sailing. Give me a number to let me know where you are when it comes to how you feel about updating your resume. And I can't see who's all here, so I'm literally going to be depending on the comments in the chat to kind of guide me here. Let me know, how are you feeling as we're getting ready to start talking about updating your resume and what that experience is for you. All right, we got a 6. That's pretty average. It's pretty average for sure, because there's a lot of anxiety in it. I love it. I love it. We got some numbers coming through. And I'm going to share my screen as you guys are coming into the chat. And don't be shy tonight. We're going to have a good time. We're going to talk through some things. But this only works if, I tell you what you want to know. So I'm excited to be able to kind of dive into the things that you actually care about today. All right. I am assuming that everybody sees my screen. And so, again, I'm Catherine. I'm a founder of the onlinecareerstore.com. Feel free to check it out. It's got resume templates that can be really meaningful and helpful for you. All righty. So here are a few questions I want to start by asking you. And this is your own personal work. You don't have to put this in the chat. But question number 1, when you look at your resume, do you think this looks really dope? Do you think that your resume looks good? Because I think of a resume like a new suit. Like when it looks good, I feel good about it. So if your answer is yes, give yourself 5 points. This is on your own personal paper. You don't have to put this into the chat. The second question is, does your resume tell a complete story of your most significant and relevant professional achievements? Like, are there some things that you've accomplished that you're really excited about and it actually shows up on your resume? If that's a yes for yourself, give yourself 5 points. Number 3, when you're applying for roles, are you making changes to the formatting? Are you switching things around? Are you adding keywords as you're applying for roles? If the answer is yes, give yourself 5 more points. The answer is no, it's okay. Just let it fly. No points for you. Number 4, does your resume contain color? Do you have colors selected based off of emotions that you want to provoke in others who are reading it? If your answer is yes, give yourself 5 more points. Number 5, is your resume 2 pages or less? If your answer is yes, girl, yes, give yourself 5 more points. Number 6, does your resume have a compelling headline? Like when you see it, you're like, I'm proud of that, right? I'm proud of that. I own that. That is my story in words. Give yourself 5 points if the answer is yes. Number 7, do you include non-traditional information? Things like quotes, assessment results. If the answer is yes, give yourself 5 more points. And so now I want you to tally up all of your points. One of the things I want you all to understand as we navigate this conversation is that your resume is supposed to work for you. It is not just a sheet of paper. It literally is supposed to tell your story without you stepping into a room, right? It's supposed to leave people interested, just like a really good book should. And so as you tally up your points, if you've got 10 points or less, then you're in the right spot, right? That means we've got a little bit of work to do to help you land the opportunities that you really want to land. If you're between 15 and 20 points, that means you're really at this sweet spot where your resume is probably just right, but you've got a few things that you can leverage to make it even better. And then if you're that 25 plus point marker, then that means that your resume is probably working really, really well for you. And today might be a refresher, or you might get some just new and fresh ideas. So as we navigate today, we're going to dive into a few very specific things. And today is really about best practices and sharing some best practices with you as you navigate updating your resume. And so let's jump straight in to the first section here. I think I switched back and forth swing. There we go. All right, here are some trends I want you guys to be very aware of, and I want these trends to go away on your resume. So one, graduation dates. Graduation dates are really useful if you have not graduated yet, but let's say you've already graduated, then what you really need to just have on your resume is your actual degree. You don't necessarily need the dates. In this day and time, we've got to be very thoughtful about ageism and age discrimination, and so the story is that I have the degree, not when I received the degree, right? Also, we want to be thoughtful to get away from task bullets, telling people specifically what you did, right? Think of the resume in the process of acquiring a new opportunity as the what, and the interview is the how. So the resume is like, here is what I've done in terms of metrics, results, and performance-driven data, right? Not necessarily, if I'm a teacher, I don't want to put on my resume that I teach students. It's kind of like the duh, right? But what I could put there are some very specific performance-driven metrics. We'll get into that a little bit later. References, you don't need them unless they're asked for, okay? LinkedIn profiles that aren't up to date. It's all good until somebody goes and checks out your LinkedIn and it's not up to date. And so I'm really excited about your next session because having your LinkedIn up to date is literally the plug as you go into 2022, especially closing out this year. Having too many graphics, making a really busy picture that doesn't do anything. Thinking about applicant tracking systems, they can't read pictures. And so being very thoughtful about what's graphically appealing versus what's actually useful space being taken up real estate on your resume. And then finally, having more than 2 pages. More than 2 pages for me does not necessarily mean that you are more accomplished, more credentialed. It could perhaps mean that you can't communicate concisely, right? Tell people what they need to know quickly and make them so interested that they want to call you to learn about what's next. So we're going to talk about 5 game changers to really, really update your resume. And please feel free to put questions in the chat. I'm having to toggle back and forth, but I am checking occasionally for your questions. So game changer number 1 is making sure that you use a resume type that actually works for you. Chronological is our typical, so that's when your jobs are in order. But often what I see, especially either it's for new college students or for persons who are switching careers or pivoting or wanting to lean in a different direction, a functional resume or a combination resume can be very, very useful. So functional resumes are organized by skill sets and competencies, not by job titles. And it can be extraordinarily powerful for you to be able to talk about, let's say you have been a teacher and maybe you're moving to public speaking, right? Well, what's consistent between the two is the competency of public speaking, right? Or what's consistent between the two is the competency of preparing presentations. And so using sections that are specific to competencies or skills, and then under those sections, actually listing performance-driven metrics. That is a game changer when you're thinking about how you pivot your resume and really make it stand out. Our game changer number 2 is being very thoughtful about the font and format. And I spend a lot of time talking about font and format, not because words aren't important. Content is still king. But think about it this way. Have you ever gone to a bookstore and picked up a book you didn't like you didn't think the cover was pretty? You probably haven't. There was something on the cover, whether it was the color or the title or the picture or the words, something attracted you to it, and your resume is actually the exact same way. You literally should have an attractive resume. I literally take pride in how gorgeous my resume is. It's so well formatted. It's so neat. It's so clean. It's bold. And it's a lot of me, honestly. But I take a lot of pride in how it looks. In fact, often one of the compliments I get is like, are you a designer? And I'm like, actually, I'm not. But that's how much pride I take in how it looks. And so here are a few different things you can think about when you think about the font and format of your resume. One, using color. Color is actually okay on your resume. Color psychology is real, right? And so thinking about what colors do I want to exude? Green shows that I can grow things, shows my nature to nurture things, right? My nature to grow things, my nature to make things better than when I found it, my nature to exude wealth, right? Those are all green things. If you think about a lot of banks are green, right? Because of color psychology. You think about blue, it's trust, right? It's trust, it's relational. These types of colors matter. And so how do you want someone to feel as they look at your resume, right? How do you weave in your brand story? Who are you as a brand, and how do you weave that into the resume, right? So if you're a really energetic, upbeat person, you might try an orange, right? An orange that is pleasing to the eye, that's not too stark, obviously used well, right, subtly, but you really want to think about what are some colors that I can use that would be really beneficial to the emotions that I want to invoke in the person reading it. Also, white space. You want to make sure that your resume has enough white space that my eyes don't get tired of looking at it. That is so real. When I was a recruiter, I would look at anywhere from 40 to 50 resumes a day. If you can imagine, by the time I'm on number 27, I've looked at a lot. My eyes are tired. So is your resume neat enough? Is there enough white space that it doesn't overexert my eyes to pay attention to it, right? Is it even appealing where I want to continue to look at it? Fonts, making sure you don't have more than 2 fonts on the resume. You don't need 6. Chill out. You don't need 6 different fonts, right? And being really thoughtful of the fonts that you choose and how that correlates who you are, how that correlates, what your ability even is to be modern, right? There are some fonts that are really modern, like Calibri, right? There are some fonts that are a little bit old school, like Times New Roman. Nothing wrong with it, but all of these things tell a story, right? Even Times New Roman, if you think about it, it has like those extra pieces on it. And so if you've got a resume with a lot of words, I wouldn't use Times New Roman, because all of those little extra pieces on each letter tends to hang over, and it makes the page really, really, really busy. But my final piece for format, and the piece that I really want you guys to make sure you're thoughtful about, is positioning the most relevant information in the top half of your resume. So traditionally, I know, someone told you to always put education at the top. But what if education, in this instance, for a role that you're interested in, what if that's actually not the most relevant to the experience? I don't want you to put it at the top. I want you to put only the things that make the most sense for sharing your brand story at the top. And so maybe that's skills, maybe that's an objective summary. That's a really good one. Don't just write a generic one, but one that's really good. Maybe you want to put your most notable achievements. That's actually what is at the top of my resume. I put, I hit people really quick. Like, these are the 3 top things that I've done that are exceptional. I um, I developed a process and designed a process for an organization to navigate a $19 billion acquisition. Pretty significant. It's one of the first things on my resume. So thinking about, what do you want people to know about you? And here's an exercise I'm going to give you. When we think about branding and when we think about weaving our resume story through our professional brand story through our resume, there are 3 things that you need to make sure you have. And those 3 things are simply, what are the things that when I walk into the room and when I walk out of the room of the perfect opportunity, what are the 3 things I want people to know about me professionally? What are 3 things I want people to know about my expertise professionally? And if you can answer those 3 things in your resume, then it's a really, really, really good resume. So I'm going to take a pause. I want to make sure you guys are still with me in the chat. Let me know right now, if you were to think about the 3 things you really want people to know about you, are those 3 things present in your resume today? Just give me a yes or no. Like, yep, it's there. I promise the 3 things I want people to know about me professionally, they are in my resume right now. And maybe not. Maybe you're like, never thought about that. I'm not sure it is. I've kind of just been sticking to the script of doing sort of a random resume update, but maybe I've not been really intentional about it. And I'm going to actually, I'm going to talk a little bit to you, Lisa, while we're waiting on people to come in through the chat, talking about professional branding online. I think the next speaker is really going to hone in on that. But what I would for sure say is there is, and I'm going to give you guys this for free, there is what I like to call a brag sheet. It's a 2-pager. It's something I walk all of my clients through having. And basically, Lisa, it's almost like a synopsis of your experiences that you can share with people in just casual networking, right? So for sure, your LinkedIn, though, I will tell you, is clutch. And the next speaker is going to talk all about that. Your LinkedIn is so significant, but maybe you don't want to share your resume as you're just getting out there attempting to especially navigate your way into academia, because it is a little bit difficult at times. Having a CV is for sure meaningful. Having a document that expresses your teaching philosophy is for sure meaningful, but also having a brag sheet that as you network, you can just kind of share with people to say hey, Lisa, so glad we connected. Would love to share this with you. If there are any opportunities in academia that come up, would love for you to be able to see what I have to offer, right? So being able to give people something that doesn't feel as pushy as a resume, but something that for sure encompasses your experiences in a way that's interesting. So I hear a lot of people saying, hey, yep, got some stuff in there, maybe not expressed directly enough, maybe not super intentional. So this is good, right? Because we can really take these exercises and go back and say, okay, let me make sure these things are so intentionally woven. I'll give you guys another secret. This is actually an ATS secret as well, is that words in the job description, keywords in the job description should for sure show up in your resume, but not just one time. I would go for at least 2 to 4 times, depending on what the word is. I do a lot of organizational development work. And so if I'm applying for a role and in the job description is organizational development, I'm probably going to have that woven into my resume 3 to 4 different times, right? The stronger it is, the more branding that there is, the easier it is for people to connect with your experiences. What do I think is the most important thing for people to include on their resumes? I would say an authentic account of the things that you've done. So that's a really great question, and I am going to move to my next slide because I think this is going to answer it for you. Performance with facts, figures, and results. If you do nothing else, and my clients know I do not play about this, you need to be able to tell who, what, when, where, why, how many, and what was accomplished. Ensuring that like almost every other bullet on your resume should have some sort of metric attached to it. Why? Because it really gives people the scope of your work. It takes generic things and makes them very specific and honed in. It's one thing for me to say, I led a team of people to meet our goals. Maybe that's on my resume. Led a team of people to meet our goals versus, I led a 10-person team to meet, our goals, exceeding them by 20% 3 consecutive years in a row. That's a very different story to tell, right? Same difference, but not so much. One of them is significantly more impressive. And so as you write out the bullets on your resume, every time you get to a bullet, I want you to ask yourself, so what? All right. Can you guys promise me that every time you get to the end of a bullet, I want you to say, so what? And if the bullet doesn't answer, so what, it's not strong enough. Right. And so if it just says, fielded calls from the call center, so what? Right. Maybe you should say, manage 20 to 30 calls per day, mitigating customer service cost in returns by 20%, right? So giving the so what, giving the scope, helping people really understand the significance and the impact of what you have done. That is my number one thing. Something else that can be really cool that could help you is, especially when you're going across industries, is creating a little tagline in your resume under where you may have the job that you've done. So let's say you've worked at Pizza Hut, right? And so right under Pizza Hut, maybe you do a very small description of Pizza Hut. Because if you've moved across industries a lot and you've worked for maybe companies that are not well known, then it might be hard for the recruiter or the hiring manager to place the significance of what you've done in that space because they don't understand the company. One of your goals in creating a really succinct resume is to tell as much of the story as possible. So sometimes creating that extra line that shares with people what the company is about and what you've done there can be significant. So I think like on my resume, one of the things I talk about in that section is like I direct and I oversee multiple strategic initiatives as it pertains to equity, organizational development, succession, and employee relations, right? So that gives somebody a scope of all of the things that I touch. And then right under there, I'm not going to have some whack bullets telling them again what I'm doing. I'm now just going to focus in on giving them very specific achievements that I've accomplished in those different areas. Okay. So going back to that question, making sure that you got facts, figures, and results that really speak to the impact of what you've done is probably the thing that I want to make sure you always, always, always have on a resume. That was a really great question. All right. Are you guys still with me? Let me know if you're with me. Give me a yes. I'm still with you. Give me a no. Girl, this is overwhelming. Let me know. Let me know. Because I want to make sure that this is helpful for you. I want to make sure that you have context into how to move in this space. You guys still with me? You still hanging in there? All right. Thank you, Kelly. So let's then talk about customizing your resume. This is my favorite thing. Probably about, 12 years now. I remember applying for a job and the hiring manager said, what did he say? He said, this has been like a book to read, one of my favorite books to read. It was my resume. Be clear, it was only 2 pages. But what he meant was it was interesting. He was like, you just got a lot of things on here that are interesting. And I did, because I've never written my resume in a way that is traditional. I write it in a way that is true to me and who I am. I want people to read it and to be interested in who I am And so I kind of just like fly off the seat a little bit, and I do it in a way that is just truly valuable to my experiences. And so I just want to call out a few sections that maybe you've not considered adding to your resume. So the first is section number 3. I think I told you guys about that. The notable projects and achievements. Maybe you don't want to write like an objective statement, etc. But think about like in the lifeline of your career, what are some projects that like will never get old? You'll never like you'll never stop feeling a win from that project. Mine is the $19 billion acquisition I worked on. It'll never get old. It doesn't matter what year, it will never ever get old for me. It's always going to be on that resume because I was getting some work and I was putting in work and that thing worked. You know what I mean? And so think about the projects that you are excited about that will never go out of style and put them on your resume. Let people see what you've done in a way that you're really proud of it, right? Number 5, this is one of my favorites, adding assessment results. Have you taken the DISC profile? Have you taken Strengths Finders? Have you taken 16 personalities? Do you know your Enneagram, right? These are things that are actually really beneficial to help people to get to know you. And it's totally fair to put it on your resume to tell the story. I have my Strengths Finders on my resume because I think it's really important for people to see like how I work. And if that works for them, I love it because they call, right? And we were able to work through opportunities. But it also gives people insight as I come into the experience of interviewing with them of who I am, right? It tells them a little bit about the areas of which I really thrive, which are like responsibility and harmony and actualization. Like all those things are really meaningful to who I am and how I work. So I have it on my resume, right? If you are really into Enneagram, right? Being able to put your number and maybe some positive attributes of your Enneagram number, right? These are cool and interesting things that nobody is going to be mad at you for adding on your resume. If anything, it's going to be interesting. It's like, oh, never seen that before because a lot of people aren't doing it. So it's also a way to really stand out. Number 6, a professional brand statement. I am not a huge fan of like just plain objectives, but I am a huge fan of putting professional brand statements. Like, what do you want? What are you trying to do? Tell the people, right? Create a statement that is powerful, that is impactful, and play around a little bit with it. There are times where I literally put questions at the top of my resume, right? Again, it's interesting. You know, maybe the question that you put on your resume is like, you know, are you tired of searching for the right candidate, someone who understands analytics, graphics, and media? You can stop searching. You found me. 12 plus year expert in blah, 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 right? Speak to your audience. It's literally for them. The resume is for them to read. Give them something interesting to read, right? These tactics don't work when you don't have the expertise to back it up. But when you do, give the people something to read, give them something to reflect on, give them something interesting to think about, okay? It always wins, I promise you. Number 7, portfolio or gallery of your work. You know, if you're in a space where a portfolio makes sense, put a link to your portfolio on your resume. It's wonderful to see. If you are like me and every once again you write articles, I don't necessarily have a portfolio or gallery, but I have a LinkedIn profile and I upload my articles to my LinkedIn profile, right? So I make sure that my LinkedIn profile is optimized so that it can go on my resume. But even more importantly, you can actually just put the link to just the articles I've written directly onto my resume, right? And maybe I say something like, you know, organizational development philosophy, and then have a link there so people can go straight to it and read my philosophies, right? So really think about how can I show up? How can I share more of myself with people in this, with this document? And then finally, one of my favorites, least commonly used, unless you're my client and I make you, is affirmative quotes. And so if you've got performance appraisals, if you've got, you know, where people have given you, you know, sent you an email and said, oh my God, Sean, you masterfully put this together. blah, 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 blah. Whatever those things are, kind of like reviews. Why wouldn't you put them on your resume? Make space for one or two. Let me ask you this. When you're going to a new restaurant, do you prefer to go to a restaurant that you just saw and you know nothing about? Or do you prefer to go to a restaurant that you Yelped before you went and it had like 4.9 and like 500 reviews? Which is your preference, right? And here's the thing. Even if the restaurant only had 3 reviews and they were all really good, you might choose that over the restaurant that you just saw walking down the street or riding down the street, right? Because people love evidence. And so give it to them. Give them those quotes from your performance appraisal that speak to your expertise and that speak to your excellence and your brilliance. Don't make them search for it. Just give it to them. I literally just got finished working with a client that just got a job offer yesterday. And in the follow-up letter, in the thank you letter, we put quotes directly from her performance appraisal. Said, hey, during the interview, you talked about these different things. I'd like to affirm those things using these comments from my performance appraisal. This is how you weave the story all the way through. You start with your resume, you do your LinkedIn, optimize that, you go into the interview, and you're still telling those 3 main things, and then you follow it up with a thank you letter. But if you start at the resume and do it there, then they're just hearing multiple times how good you are at those 3 things. And just like good marketing, the more they hear it, the more they believe it. Are you guys with me? Does that make sense? All right, we've got a question, 2 questions I'm going to answer. How do you collect or find your metrics for your resume? Honestly, it's not hard to find, right? So think about the work that you do. And often this is why it's really important to keep track of the work that you do as you do it, right? Because perhaps you are in an organization and like, let's say you work in a call center. So those metrics are probably really easy to find, right? But there are also times where maybe you work in a people org or you do some different customer facing things. What I would always think about is, okay, can this be metriced? What is the outcome of what I'm doing? Again, going back to that, so what, Bethany? It's kind of like, okay, I'm doing this, but what am I doing this for? Because every single thing you guys do in your day-to-day work is for a metric outcome. 9 times out of 10, if you work for a profitable organization, it's for a metric outcome, right? If you are teaching, how many classes a day are you teaching? That's a metric, right? If you're teaching, how many students are you leading? That's a metric. If you're teaching, how many teachers are you coaching, right? That's a metric, right? If you're a teacher and you're over engagement for, the teachers union, then what is the retention metric, right? In a 12-month period, how many teachers left? Only 1 teacher left out of 10. All right, 10%, right? So you lost 10%, but you retained 90%, right? And so really just getting in the mindset of saying, okay, what am I doing this for? And how can I metric this? Don't despise the simple metrics because sometimes it's literally just the scope of what you do that people really want insight into. Great question, Bethany. From Dominique, should you use metrics in all bullet points or mix it up? The more you have, I think the better, right? Because remember, you're attempting to share impact. You're sharing how I can be impactful. These metrics show how I can be impactful or in what ways I'm impactful, right? And then you get to the interview and you kind of walk them through how you got those metrics, right? They're like, oh, you had 90% retention of your teachers. Saw that on your resume. In your interview, you get to explain how you got to that retention number, right? And so I would say, Dominique, as much as you can metric, go crazy, go off, sis. You know what I mean? Because it's really meaningful to have people to be able to look at what you've done and the scope of people you've influenced. One of the metrics on mine is like the amount of people I oversee. It's significant, right? I oversee 2,000 people. That's significant. And so I have that on there because it's very different than saying, hey, I'm a department lead or I'm a director for a team of 3. Both are great, but it's two very different stories. So as much as you can metric as possible, numbers never get old. I think Jay-Z taught us that for sure. Kelly, yep, love the idea of adding reviews. Absolutely. Do it. Let me tell you, it is a game changer because remember, you're always telling your story and you're always really getting new opportunities. It's just getting people to buy into your story. That's it. That's all it is, getting people to buy into who you are. And the more people that can vouch for you, the more significant that story becomes. All right, if you guys are with me, let me know. Is this helpful? If you've heard something that you've never heard before, just say me. Just let me know. Like if you've gotten something new that you haven't gotten before, just let me know. And keep the questions coming because I want to make sure I'm answering those too. But I just want to make sure you guys are with me. And that we are on track. We got about 10 minutes. And so I just want to make sure we're on track here. You guys with me? We still there? All right. Hi, Dejanay. Cool. Perfect. Good. Thank you, Sean. All righty. You guys still hanging with me. I appreciate it. All right. Let's go back here. All right. Last but not least, our game changer number 5, writing powerful content, right? And so there are a lot of things you have to consider when you're telling your story. I've told you guys that I want your resume to look pretty, and I mean that. But I also want you to write good content. I want you to tell your story in a way that people just get it, right? And so this kind of goes back to one of those questions I think maybe Bethany asked, or maybe Dominique asked, how much should be metric or what those bullets should look like. Every accomplishment you choose to share in your resume should answer 3 questions. What did you do? To who? For what did you do it? And then what was the result? Every last one should answer all 3, right? So I give you guys even an example. Develop an engagement strategy for monthly donors, increasing retention by 15% in 6 months. That's a very thorough story. And one thing that I'll help you understand is the more thorough your bullets are, the least you need to have. I think we've kind of in this habit of putting like 10 and like 1,500 bullets. You don't need that many. You just need some good, solid ones that tell your story, right? That tell the fullness of what you've done. I think I may have like 5 to 7. For me, that's the sweet spot. 7 is like max, right? Like you got to have it on there. But 5 to 7 is really solid because the most concise resume answers bullets, answers achievement in this format, and people then don't need as many, right? And so I even mix it up for you guys. Second here, if you look here, same achievement, but I just mix it up. Increased retention by 15% in 6 months by developing an engagement strategy for monthly donors. So I did both of those so that you can see it really doesn't matter how you word it, but having those 3 components is really significant. What did you do? To who? For what? And then what was the result, right? Remember, this is where people get the meat of your story. And this is where you really get to tailor your resume to the experiences that you want people to know about you, right? I am obsessed with all things organizational development, design, creating equity frameworks within design, those things. And so all throughout my resume, there are my achievements specific to those arenas, right? And so you get to decide, okay, these are the 3 things, going back to the 3 things I told you about, because we're going to always weave that in. These are the 3 things I care the most about people knowing about me. And here is how I weave them in every single bullet. Every single bullet should have a remnant, a breadcrumb of one of those 3 things. It's the ultimate test for, is my resume telling the brand story that I want it to tell? Okay. We're leaving breadcrumbs all over the process of seeking new opportunities. And what's fun is that when you make some of these changes, I'll give you guys a little secret. I have a core resume So I have one resume that's like really, really long. And it just has everything I've ever done just like on there, right? And I usually go back there. When it's time for me to update my resume or freshen things up, I go back to the core document and I freshen the core document up. That way, if I see an opportunity that I'm interested in, I like pull my core document and I delete, I highlight, I kind of mess around with it, and I just save it as a different document. So I'm always creating new resumes off of the core document. I'm never having to start completely from ground zero. That's why when it's time for me to update my resume, my anxiety level is like zero, because it's fun for me to just go in there because I've already got this shell and I'm just kind of pulling and drawing from what I already have. And so as I wrap up, with the tips, that's one that I would strongly recommend you guys consider. Where's the core document? And in your core document, you can have 5 different summary statements. It doesn't really matter, right? Because when it's time for you to apply for one opportunity, you'll just erase the others and save the document as new. But like if you come up with something really good, you're like, oh, I want to capture this, put it on your core document, put your results, all the things on your core document, so that then when it's time to update, you're just pulling and replacing information. That's it. So I've got like 3 minutes and I want to toss it to this team. Let me know, what questions do you have? What things are still burning in your mind that you're like, wait, before we go, you've got to answer this for me. Yes, Ashley, absolutely. When we see our resumes as a marketing tool, no different from Instagram or Facebook or whatever, it becomes a lot less of an anxious activity. And what I really consider when I'm redoing a resume or even preparing an interview or whatever is a realignment activity. This is time for me to look at this document and to decide, does it represent where I'm trying to go? And if it doesn't, let me do some things to make some adjustments and some realignments. So I hope that this has been helpful for you all. I'm so excited about the trajectory that you guys are on. Happy to answer any questions. My email is Catherine@pivot180.com. If you maybe think of a question afterwards where you're like, really want to kind of get that question out, please feel free to email me. I am very approachable for those who know me, very happy to answer your questions. Feel free, if you're looking for new templates for your resume or how resumes can look, just as some examples, the onlinecareerstore.com has plenty of examples for you for how it can look. And I'm just really excited about where you guys can go when you get really bold about how you present your story. Yes, Kelly, an example of what? Glad to help you. And so glad this was helpful. Oh, Charlotte has a question. I'm not sure. Do we have time for a question, Duana?
Sure. Yes, we have time for one question. That's great.
Okay. How do you determine what information to cut from a career resume of 20 years? So I think there are 2 things you need to consider. One, I typically, from a time frame perspective, would recommend 10 to 12 years max, right? Typically. What I will say, though, is most important is the relevancy of the experience. If you've been doing a thing for 20 years consistently, so for example, like beyond my own rule of 10 years, I've been doing organizational development for probably closer to like 14, right? I'm putting all of that on there. But what I might consider is the earlier experiences, I might collapse them differently, right? So I might not put every single thing I did at my very first job. What I might do is I might say like, what was notable about my experiences there, and just take the notable experiences and pull them out and put them at the top of my resume, right? So you really just have to consider, is this relevant? What most relevant things do I want to keep on here? And how do I want to format it in a way that's not overwhelming for someone? Oh, thanks, Dejanay. So glad to hear
Yeah.
that.
Thank you, Dejanay. And I definitely agree with Dejanay. I mean, that is exactly what I wanted to say, that this has been one of the best resume discussions that I've ever sat
Oh,
through.
thank
So
you.
thank you, Catherine. Like, this has been great. I mean, you've brought up some things that I didn't know. I haven't written a resume in quite some time.
I
So,
understand.
you gave a lot of wonderful hints that would either would be great to consider now. Like one of the things that you said, we like to, like even on LinkedIn, when you put in your company name, they'll
Mhm,
give the logo of the company.
mhm.
And it's interesting that you said that, the algorithms and the computer systems where you upload your resume, they don't notice that stuff. So you're just kind of using up
Prime real estate.
real estate on
Yep,
your resume for nothing. It's not being read or picked up. So you could have
yep.
used that space for something else. And then something else interesting that you said that I've never thought about was using color. I've never thought about using color on a resume. So
No,
that
absolutely.
won't affect the words that are there. So that's interesting. Of course, I know we have to be careful about the colors and all that
Yes.
type of thing. So anyway, Catherine, we really, really, really appreciate you coming to give us to talk about this. And also, I want to let our audience know that I really appreciate your questions. We appreciate your questions. It let us know that you're interested in this topic. And I want to direct you to Catherine, if she doesn't mind, I want to direct you to her online resume store. Can you say what that address is? And I'll type it in the chat box. What is
Yes, it is www.theonlinecareerstore.com. So it's just theonlinecareerstore.com. And I think someone was asking for maybe some templates, etc. I have templates on there that you can take a look at to give you some ideas of some of the things that I mentioned today,
Okay.
especially color. There's some ones with color on there. So
Okay. 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 Well, thank you so much.
no
Audience,
problem. Thank you guys.
we do have another session coming up, and if you'll just hang tight just for like 3 to 5 minutes as we transition, but we're going to talk about your virtual brand on LinkedIn, and we have Olivia Hayes to do that discussion. So Catherine, you can either stay with us tonight and listen, or otherwise we definitely appreciate you coming tonight and giving us this amazing information that we all need.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. So our next speaker is Olivia Hayes, and Olivia Hayes serves as the career consultant she's a career consultant who's assisting our graduate nursing, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and graduate healthcare administration students in Houston with their career all career considerations. She's from Kansas City, Missouri, and she attended Prairie View A&M University for her bachelor's degree and her master's degree. And she's currently working on a doctorate degree in ethical leadership at the University of St. Thomas in Houston. Her dissertation will focus on undergraduate Black male STEM students' perceptions of academic advising in higher education. Olivia's top 5 strengths are positivity, includer, achiever, self-assurance, and arranger. Olivia's strengths are important within her role because she has the ability to provide enthusiasm, positivity, inclusivity, and confidence to students as they embark on their desired career path. She's a proud member of her sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, where she continues to exemplify excellence through sustainable service while giving back to her community. In her spare time, she enjoys spending time with her family. And her favorite quote she continues to live by as a part of her continued success is by a quote by Shirley Chisholm. You don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas. So hopefully we can welcome to the stage Olivia Hayes at this point. Hi, Olivia. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Dr. Horn?
I am great, great. So sorry about the technical difficulties that you've experienced, but hopefully, the good things come to those who wait. So we've waited for you, and I know that we're going to receive some really good information from your presentation tonight.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. And thank
Okay,
you
so
for
I've
having me.
already kind of prepped the audience that we're going to talk about establishing your virtual brand on LinkedIn. And so a lot of people have mentioned in the chat, have commented in the chat that they really need help in that area. So I know that you are going to provide that help. So thank you for being here. And audience, I really, really thank you for sticking with us for this important conversation about your LinkedIn profiles, your virtual presence there. Thank you. Olivia, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. And I am going to share my screen. All right. Well, good evening to all of you. I'm very excited to be here and sharing this time in this space. So I want to give a huge thank you to Dr. Horn and her team. Thank you, Dr. Lambert, for assisting me with the technology issues. But I'm here and I'm ready. So thank you both, and thank you to all of you. And I really hope that throughout the duration of this presentation that you guys will learn anything that will help you or take you to the next level as far as your presence on LinkedIn, and then also looking within yourself to identify your virtual brand and how that relates to utilizing LinkedIn. And so we're going to have some fun throughout the duration of this presentation. So feel free to utilize the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to, place those questions in the chat box. And so you already have received an introduction, but once again, my name is Olivia Hayes. I currently serve as the career consultant here on the Texas Women's University's Houston campus. And so some of the things that we are charged with in our department is, of course, career development, but some of the things that we do with our students is we work with our students to really engage them in, most importantly, their virtual brand or their personal brand, but most importantly, how can you portray yourself to employers in order to go further in your career and, get whatever you're seeking out of your experience. And so without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into the presentation. So this is going to be our agenda. The first thing that we're going to talk about is utilizing LinkedIn. And so really trying to figure out what the importance of utilizing LinkedIn is. And then second, building a virtual brand. You may oftentimes refer to that as a personal brand, but in the case of this presentation, we are going to focus on building that virtual brand. Next, we're going to focus on building a professional network, and then, pretty much identifying what that looks like as far as networking and the different types of networking associations or different things that you can be a part of in order to build your professional network. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some informational interviewing tips that can really assist you as you get ready to go forth and conquer the world of whatever field you are wanting to enter into. And so the first thing that I wanted to kind of just go ahead and talk to you guys about is, like I said, we're going to have a lot of fun here. So just some quick facts. So when we think about LinkedIn, these are some of the things that you want to think about. Okay. And a lot of the information that I'm going to provide to you is going to make sense. It's going to all connect. And then at the end of the presentation, you'll see what all of this means. And so first, LinkedIn, we all utilize LinkedIn. If you do not have a LinkedIn, I really encourage you to go ahead and create a profile. As you see here, some of the quick facts are that there are over 55 job applications that are submitted every second via LinkedIn. More than 72% of LinkedIn users are from outside of the United States. And LinkedIn is considered to be one of the world's largest professional networking platform. And then, of course, the United States is ranked number one based on the number of LinkedIn members that are currently registered. And then 51% of college graduates people like myself, we utilize LinkedIn, and then over 46 million students in recent graduates are on LinkedIn. So these are just a couple of quick facts as we get into the duration of our presentation. And so as I mentioned, keep some of these things in mind because it will make sense as to, how you should portray yourself and how you should convey yourself as a part of your virtual or your personal brand. So why should you utilize LinkedIn? And so one of the top reasons that you should definitely look into utilizing LinkedIn is that you should want to gain, or you can gain exposure to hiring managers and recruiters. It can be utilized as a research tool. It can be utilized to gain social proof for your skills and talents. They also have a feature that is called LinkedIn Learning, and it can create professional development opportunities for you. And then also you can demonstrate your knowledge, your credibility, and leadership expertise. You can navigate the desired job search. You can follow companies and employers of your choice. And then, of course, you can join groups that are on LinkedIn. So these are just a couple of things that you can get out of utilizing LinkedIn. So next, we're going to talk about building a virtual brand and what does that look like. So your personal brand is your reputation and your legacy. So one of the things that I want you to think about or even utilize the chat is, how do you portray or how do you perceive yourself to be? Meaning, what is your personal brand? You can even put one word in the chat box. How do you identify yourself as it relates to your personal brand? And then one thing you want to remember is that a strong personal brand can lead to potential job opportunities or even career opportunities. And so as we're navigating this presentation, another thing that I want you all to think about is, what is your 30-second elevator pitch? And so if you do not know what that looks like or what that is, that's okay. I'll be more than happy to explain what that is. So a 30-second elevator pitch is, for example, you're meeting with an employer or you are wanting to meet with an employer. And say, for example, you go up to them maybe at a conference and you're like, oh, this is my favorite company. What are you going to say to that employer that's going to convey to them that they should hire you? So that is when we get into the idea of speaking about your personal brand and, of course, that reputation and that legacy that you either are working towards or, of course, that you are wanting to leave ahead of you or, whatever field you're going into. What is that reputation and legacy that you're hoping to leave behind or create? So looking at this particular visual and defining your current brand, and it's okay if you have not already defined your current brand. But one thing that I want you to keep in mind is, how are you perceived by others? That is very important as you are navigating the job search, is how are you perceived by others? And so as you see on the screen on the left-hand side, this is your view. This is your view. This is your perception of yourself versus the team's view, the employer's view. How are you perceived by others? That is one question that you want to ask yourself when you're trying to define your brand. Is, how are you perceived? So definitely keep those things in mind as we're navigating the presentation. Is, how are you perceived and how do you even want employers to perceive you? So creating your virtual brand. So what does your personal brand look like? Or what does a virtual brand look like? So some key tips that you want to keep in mind is that first you want to show your core values. And so what does this mean? So what this means is that your core values should communicate a very strong set of values that distinguishes you from your competitors. And so we all know that depending on your field or your line of work, it can be very competitive. One of the things that I say to my nursing students all the time is that you're not competing with yourself. You're competing with not just the TWU nursing students or that cohort. You're also competing with external students from those other universities and colleges as well. So you want to make sure that you identify a set of core values that will, like I said, distinguish you from your competitors. And so how can you relate that to your job search? So you should definitely want to look for potential employers with which you share those same perspectives and core values. And so you may hear me reference, a lot of the things that I say to my students. And so one of the things that career connections, or even just as a career consultant, that I try to instill in my students is that you want to make sure that whatever it is that, you are a strong believer of, you definitely want to make sure that that company or that organization definitely portrays the same values, or, the mission, whatever it is you are seeking, you want to make sure that that particular job speaks to your personal values or your core values. And so the next tip is to be unique and be creative when you're thinking of your virtual brand. And so when writing your resume or your cover letter, or, utilizing your LinkedIn summary, be unique. One thing that I cannot, stress is to be yourself. If the employer or anyone does not see you for who you really are, then maybe that may not be the employer for you. So definitely be unique, be creative, express your personality and your creativity. And so some of the things that you want to ask yourself as far as being unique and being creative is that, are you a suitable match for the role or the company based on your personality and your creativity? Okay, that's one question that you want to ask yourself as you are trying to navigate that particular search or even creating your brand. And so then lastly, you want to determine a target audience and then determine your pitch. And so what you should do in this particular aspect is identify who and what your target audience is. And so as I mentioned, this is all going to connect. And so identifying who your target audience is will then create a platform for you to begin networking, which we'll get into in just a second as far as building those relationships. And so one of the things that you want to think about is what will be your 30-second elevator pitch as far as when you identify your target audience. And so another thing that you want to do is create messages or personal statements that will be targeted towards that right audience. So for example, if I am an individual and I'm trying to go work in healthcare, and specifically I want to go work in maybe on the finance side of healthcare administration, what is going to be my tagline, or what will be my audience, or who will be my audience, and how will I formulate that particular statement or summary, or how will I create my brand in order to meet those expectations of going into that field. So those are some of the things that you definitely want to keep in mind as you're creating your virtual brand. So next we're going to talk about a professional online presence. And so your online image is as much as a reflection, as you see there, as your resume or interview. And so once again, I can't, and this is one thing that I mentioned to my students, is that I can't tell you, what not to say, what not to post, what not to create. But one thing that you want to keep in mind is that your online presence is going to be a reflection of who you are as an individual. And so a strong online presence, it makes it easy for employers to have those different avenues that they can kind of assess. And some of the things that you want to ask yourself is, if an employer was to search my name, so if I was to say, let's just go in and let's just search Olivia. Let's search Olivia Hayes on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever it may be. Let's search her name and let's see what her online presence says about you. And so those are some of the things that you want to keep in mind about having that professional online presence, is that it's just a reflection of you. And so going to my point about being on LinkedIn, your LinkedIn should be a reflection of your professional experience. And so as you're creating that online presence, if you don't already have one, some of the things that you want to think about is this. We're going to go to the next slide. And so these are some questions that employers may ask themselves about your personal brand or even just your virtual brand. And so the first one is based on their, okay, okay, so based on their personal brand, okay, how will they represent our company? Okay, based on their personal brand, what will or can I expect? Based on their personal brand, How would I feel if I hired them? And then lastly, based on their personal brand, does their professional goals and objectives align with our company's mission, vision, and goals? And so these are some of the things that employers could potentially ask themselves as they are, researching or looking at your LinkedIn. So it's really all about that strong presence that you know for a fact that, number one, you can have, but that you should have. And so some of the things that you should definitely not forget about creating that personal brand or that virtual brand is that this is how people market themselves. So let's flip this and say, how would you market yourself if you're on LinkedIn or, Indeed, whatever platform that you may be utilizing to navigate the job search? How will people market themselves, or how will you market themselves? And another note, the term that I use is, how will you convey to the employer who you are and why they should hire you? Which, leading up to the second point, building a professional presence and reputation is definitely key. One thing that I cannot stress is that, your reputation and your presence is key no matter what field you're going into. And so even being, in higher education, professional presence and education or reputation is definitely key. If you are going into business or healthcare administration, your presence is definitely should be very strong and definitely be a representation and a reflection of who you are as it aligns with that particular profession. So I like to call this LinkedIn edition. Okay, so promoting your virtual brand and creating that online presence. But like I say, this is LinkedIn edition. So some of the things you want to keep in mind when you're promoting your virtual brand and creating that online presence is that first you want to use a professional profile photo. As you see here on the screen, that is like a snapshot of what my LinkedIn looks like. And so as you see there, professional photo, definitely don't want to have, of course, if you have a selfie or something, but you want to make sure that it's, professional. You want to make sure that you customize your headline with keywords and phrases that are related to your desired industry or the profession. And so as you see there with my tagline, it states that I'm a career consultant and then also that I'm an EDD student. So you definitely want to make sure that your tagline conveys, number one, who you are, but make sure that it is industry specific depending on wherever you are, seeking a specific role. You want to make sure that you submit requests to connect with professionals you've worked with. I've connected with, for example, former professors, former supervisors, former employees that I've worked with. So you want to expand your network by connecting with individuals of that nature. And so then also you want to make sure that, if you are wanting to connect with someone that you may not know or you may see, maybe a benefit out of connecting with that individual, I think it has like a message that you can send to that individual to kind of just let them know who you are and things like that. And so lastly, don't just connect and leave it. Okay. Build that relationship with your network so that you can, become stronger and have those professional ties. And so as you see, there are some of the words or some of the phrases that you may, feel the need to include in your headline or your tagline on LinkedIn. Could be, healthcare administration. You could be an MBA student. You could be a TWU graduate. As Dr. Horn mentioned, I did graduate from Prairie View A&M University. So my network, I'm not going to say it's built on a lot of people that I've, formerly graduated from Prairie View with, but it is. And so, just really making those connections with different people in the community or just different ones who for a fact could potentially help you get to that next level. And so as you see there, career services provider, a business marketing specialist. So there are different, words or different phrases that you can include in your tagline to really promote yourself or that virtual brand that you're trying to create in order to increase that online presence. So building a professional network, what does this look like? So as you're building a professional network, you want to make sure that you design a network that it meets your personal branding goals. So as I stated, this is all going to connect. So now that you are trying to build that personal brand, Now we're trying to build that professional network. And so some of the types of networks that you probably will see or experience. So the National Career Development Association, so the NCDA, they identified these networks with, these particular areas. So for example, you could have personal relationships. So if you're trying to build a network, your personal relationships could result in being family members. It could be close friends. It could be, whomever that you consider to really have that personal relationship with versus having a professional relationship. So professional relationships could be professors. It could be colleagues. It could be a supervisor, anyone along the line of someone maybe in your profession. It could be a mentor that is a part of a professional association that you may be seeking. Next, you could be another type of network could be an association. So this could be a national or a local association. And so it could be alumni associations. It could be the community organizations that you may be a part of. Opportunistic networks could be followers on Twitter. It could be the Starbucks barista. It could be anybody that you kind of just come in contact with that could potentially be in passing, that could, be a part of that network. And then lastly, of course, jobs or career fairs. And so that could, of course, be employers, or it could be conference attendees, anybody that may be attending a career fair that will allow you to, go forward and expound your network. Okay. So now that you're trying to build that professional network, now we're going to define your network. And so this is an exercise that, you can do on your own time. You can do this now if you like, if you have a sheet of paper that's next to you. But imagine that you have just decided to change jobs and that you're wanting to use networking as one of your major strategies. So some of the things that you can do is jot down the names of people you could contact from each of these three areas. And so this is an exercise that was actually created by the NCDA. I'm actually in a facilitating career development course where we are learning, how to define your network. And most importantly, when we're working with clients, how is it that we can help our clients define their network? And so some of the things that you want to keep in mind with these three categories is, as we just mentioned, personal relationships. You have a cousin, do you have an aunt, do you have, an uncle, anybody that may be in a role that you have that personal relationship with that you can build your network with. Your career relationships, that's going to be, your boss, that's going to be, maybe someone who is in a, managerial role, someone who may be, for example, if you're trying to go into, nurse management, do you have a mentor that is specifically in that position that you can kind of speak with or talk to? And then lastly, the organizational and community affiliation. So for example, if you are a healthcare administration student, are you a part of SHAL? Are you, taking part in those different organizations? If you're a nursing student, are you in TNSA? For example, as she mentioned, I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So that would be considered organizational or community. So whatever organization or whatever you may be a part of that can really advance your network in that particular aspect would be acceptable. So I really encourage you, as you're trying to define your personal brand and build your network, I really say try to utilize this exercise so that you can kind of jot down specifically, okay, well, who can I call on that's personal? Who can I call on that's career related? And then most importantly, let me look within my organization and my community to identify those individuals that will allow me to build my network in that aspect. Here are some networking questions that can help you as you are navigating the job search, and we're getting ready to get into informational interviewing. And so some of these networking questions, or these are just two, but the first one, so you're probably wondering, well, why would I need these questions? So for example, as you're building your brand, okay, so we're talking about building your virtual and your personal brand. But now we're talking about building that network and developing those professional relationships. And so here are some networking questions. And so the first one, the purpose of this question would be to determine how to break into a field or a position. That would kind of be the most common. And so some questions that you could potentially ask once you've identified, a source or someone in that particular field. Once again, we're talking about networking, but some of the questions that you can ask yourself or even ask them going into it is, how did you get started in your career? Just a simple conversation. What education or training did you have prior to starting your job? And then lastly, what advice do you have for someone who wants to follow a similar career path? And so once again, the purpose of this is to really kind of pick their brain to figure out, based on their experiences, what can they instill in you that's going to help you get forward or move forward. And so then the second one is to maybe you're trying to arrange or find a link for an informational interview or volunteer opportunity. So some questions that you may ask, or something that you may consider would be, I'm gathering information about being a medical practice manager. Could you recommend someone I might talk with to learn more about, that career in that area? Okay, so that is something that you want to keep in mind, or this is just a question that you would, can keep in mind as far as, networking. So now that we've talked about building your professional brand, what does that look like as far as having, an online presence? What does that look like? We're talking about building that professional network and really trying to figure out how to build those relationships. Now we're going to talk about informational interviewing. And so informational interviewing can be meeting with people who can provide an insider's view of a particular job or a career-related field. And so some of the things that you should definitely do is determine the specific career fields that you wish to focus on. So for example, if I know for a fact that I want to go into management, specifically, like I said, nurse management or, hospital administration or healthcare administration, determine that field in which you want to focus on. After you've determined that field, do some background information or some background research on that particular field. And so these are some of the questions that you definitely want to ask yourself as you're preparing for this informational interview. Would be, what are current issues that, employers are facing in this particular field? And then what is the company's organization, or what is their mission, and what is their vision and values? And then do those mission, vision, and values align with your personal brand? So you see how all of this is connecting. You want to make sure that you're speaking with employers, and you want to make sure that as you're speaking with those employers, that their mission, vision, and values align with what you are looking for, and then who you are as a person. So if I'm an advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm going to be looking at their mission, vision, and values to see, well, do they have anything that's DEI related, that's incorporated into those best practices? And if I don't see anything, then that's almost like, okay, do I continue to proceed? Or if I know I don't have an interest in the company because of their mission, vision, and values, do you give it a shot, or do you keep going? So those are some of the questions that you want to keep in mind as you're preparing for the informational interview. And so another thing, effective networking begins with preparation. That is one thing that you should definitely keep in mind, is that the more you network and the more you build your network, you are going to be prepared, because the conversations and things that you're having with those individuals is going to set you up for whether an informational interview, whether a interview that's going to potentially come from an informational interview. So those are some of the things that you want to keep in mind as you are going into an informational interview. And so when preparing for an informational interview, these are three things that you want to focus on. Number one, yourself. Okay. Number two, the interviewee. And then number three, the industry. And so focusing on yourself, there are two questions that you definitely want to make sure that you have down pat and that you're able to answer if you were to go into an informational interview. And the first question is going to be, what can you tell me about yourself? That's a common question that a lot of us get when we go into interviews. And next, what can I do for you, or how can I help you? Okay. Those are two questions that you want to make sure that you focus on prior to going into an informational interview. The second one, focusing on the interviewee, questions that you may want to ask when you go is that, how did you get into this field? Or what professional organizations do you belong to? So once again, you are asking the questions in order to be able to expand your professional network. And then most importantly, you're building your brand in the midst of asking that question, because you're trying to see, well, how did that individual get into their role? What steps did they take? So those are questions that you may want to ask the interviewee. Now, preparing for the informational interview and looking at the industry, some questions that you may want to ask is, what training or professional development do companies in this field generally provide? So that question, you're kind of doing some digging with the industry, or maybe that position. You're just really trying to see, well, what is it that you guys are doing in your industry that's going to help me advance or help me be better? And then what trends do you see influencing the future of this field? So you're having that dialogue, you're having that talk. And so typically sometimes when you're speaking with employers, they love to hear your questions. So I think these are great questions to ask. And then lastly, what is the preferred way to network in this field? So for example, in education, the preferred way to network may be attending conferences. It may be connecting on LinkedIn. It may be because we're in the same doctoral program. It varies. With nursing, it may be when you do your clinicals, you're connecting. If you're in healthcare administration or MBA, it may be that you're connecting maybe because you're in class together, or you guys work for a different company. So it could be a series of things as to how to network in that specific field. And so one of the things that I'm here to encourage you is that if you don't have a mentor, please get one. That I cannot stress and say how important a mentor is in your specific field, because that individual is going to be able to take you through the ropes, and that individual is going to be able to show you the ins and outs of that particular field. You may have some questions, or you may be dealing with, some things as far as navigating that search that particular mentor may be able to assist you with. So if you do not have a mentor or have not identified one, I highly encourage you to really reach out to someone and maybe start that building the relationship. That's what this is all about: building your professional network and building that relationship, so that as you're navigating the job search, you have someone that you can kind of lean on, and then most importantly, they can be of assistance in whatever way they need to be. And so that concludes the duration of my presentation. As I mentioned, my name is Olivia Hayes. I am a career consultant, and on behalf of the Career Connections Center here at Texas Women's University, I definitely have enjoyed this space and I've enjoyed this time. My email is there. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. And then also feel free to connect with me via LinkedIn. Once again, this is a way for you to build your professional network, and most importantly, for us to connect. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to place them in the chat box, and I will be more than happy to answer them. But as I mentioned, I'm very excited, or I'm excited to be sharing this space with you all. So definitely feel free to ask any questions that you all have.
Olivia, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It was very informative. I learned a lot as well. Um, and I know that the audience enjoyed it as well. Audience, how did you feel about our presentation? Tell me what is one of the number one things that you'll take away from this presentation? Just type in the chat. What is one of the main things you'll take away? Okay. Charlotta says, thank you for sharing this information. Brittany says, thank you. Kelly says, thank you. Um, Jason Lambert says, thank you. So everyone enjoyed your presentation. It was some wonderful information. I'm an avid LinkedIn user, and I know how important it is in my career. I stay in touch and stay in contact with people all over the country, who are in the same field as I am. Normally, I would not see those people until our annual conferences and things, but I'm able to see what they're doing, keep up with them, and I actively and strategically network with them while on the LinkedIn platform. And also, I use LinkedIn to just network with people that I don't know as well, people who are in different industries. A lot of the things that I need for the classroom, such as, organizing this speaker series, I've had to pretty much kind of cold call some people based on my LinkedIn connection. And guess what? One thing that I found by using LinkedIn is that we're all there to network. And so if you have, questions for people about their careers, or if you have things that you would like for people to do, it's totally acceptable to jump in their inbox and message them and, and tell them what you want. I do recommend that you be specific about what you want and be specific about what you need, and make it as easy for the people as possible, because we're in a very busy world. But what I've learned from my interactions on LinkedIn and from cold calling people and everything, people normally say yes. The only reasons why they don't say yes is due to scheduling conflicts and things like that, previous obligations or things like that. But people generally want to help, and they do help. For almost 10 years, I organized a panel of judges 3 times a year for my class, and I would always get 5 to 6 people to come in and judge business plans for my students. And it would be professionals who are accountants and bank executives and owners, entrepreneurs, owners of companies, attorneys, like all types of professionals, and they would always be willing to give back to our students, and all of that is from LinkedIn. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time to highlight this for our audience, and I'm glad that everybody got a lot out of it. So thank you for your expertise, and I look forward to more workshops like this with you at the Houston campus in a face-to-face manner. So thank you for our audience for sticking with us for 2 hours tonight, and thank you for sticking with us throughout this TWU Bold Leadership Speaker Series. This has been wonderful. This is the last one, and hopefully, this has been very beneficial to you, and it will be beneficial for years to come. So with that being said, I will let everyone go for tonight. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.